not my beat.
Ben Standig, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic, joins us. Ben, good to see you today, my friend. Appreciate your time here on the radio this afternoon. How you doing?
Well, Craig, you texted me about an hour ago, and I was already 30 minutes in my drive home. Mm-hmm. I'm still not home. Traffic was horrendous by the American Legion Bridge. So, yeah, so I'm fine, but, traffic today was an abomination.
Well, you should have just stayed and done this in person, hung out with me, Ben, and then you would have been fine. You know, you could have just co-hosted the whole show, and then you probably might have gotten home at the exact same time.
If I had known, that would have been a much better deal. Yeah. Fortunately, I'd already made a pit stop at Chick-fil-A on the way home, so at least I was not starving and stuck in traffic.
That is good. Hangry and in traffic is about my nightmare combination. I just don't know how that gets worse without something truly heinous happening, so I'm happy you were at least fed with some quality chicken. All right, it's a game. You ready for this, Ben? It's a game of chicken between the Commanders and Terry McLaurin. Yeah, that's professional segue there.
That's why you're a professional.
Yeah. What have you been able to glean from both sides here on – because that is kind of where I'm at is like, what's the disagreement? I mean, we just don't really seem to know at this point. Have you been able to glean any information on where the separation is and why this has stretched into mandatory minicamp where McLaurin was not here in Ashburn today?
Yeah, the team is, not talking much as as we've seen under Adam Peters. They've typically not put out a ton of information. I don't know if this is the sole reason, but it feels like, and I've talked about this before or written about it a little bit, ultimately the money is the issue on some level, right? Because that's what we're talking about, and I feel like the divide there a little bit is the production versus the age. If you look at the top 16 receivers right now, Terry McLaurin is 16th in terms of annual average value. He's like $23.2 million. This is for the last 3-year deal that he had signed back in 2022, and obviously he's been passed by a lot of other receivers since. And then if you look at the names above him, of those 15 names, only Tyreek Hill is currently older than Terry McLaurin, who turns 30 in September. Now he's hardly old, right? He's been durable. He doesn't even have that much wear and tear on him relative to the age because he didn't play a ton at Ohio State on offense, so he kind of had to wait his turn a little bit. But I feel like that may be the difference maker because when you look at some of the names, like where he should be getting paid, like this offseason, DK Metcalf got, high $32 million. T. Higgins signed to the Bengals. He's around like high $28 million. Right? Okay, so somewhere like in between those two guys feels like a reasonable spot based on what McLaurin has produced. His impact on this team, the locker room, all those things, and also if $30 million is right where Brandon Ayuk is, you can make an argument that McLaurin's a little better. Tyreek Hill's at $30 million, Amon-Ra St. Brown's at 30. They're all very good, but is McLaurin right there with them? I mean, you can make the case after the year he just had, or at least squint hard enough to get you there. But I wonder if that may be as much of a divide as anything. That it may be an arbitrary number. When you get on the other side of 30 at certain positions, production starts to drop, and wide receiver, can be one of those spots. You start to lose a little bit of speed. As good as Terry is, he's never been like the great separator. Why he's always getting all these contested catches because he's not necessarily, running past people. So that to me feels like perhaps a sticking point. Again, I don't know for sure that it's the sticking point, but in terms of the money, it seems to me it shouldn't be that complicated to slot him somewhere in that $30 million range unless you're saying, well, the other guys who are in that range are all typically 2 to 3 years younger than you, again, other than Tyreek Hill, and that has to be factored in from the team's perspective, and maybe it isn't from McLaurin's angle.
That certainly feels like it would be something to quibble over. Do you have strong feelings, and are you comfortable giving them of which side of that argument you think is more valid?
I mean, I guess I can kind of see it from both sides. It's funny, when McLaurin signed his extension back in 2022, and same deal. He skipped some OTA, he skipped the mandatory minicamp, and then eventually, during the summer, before training camp, he signs the 3-year deal, like $71 million roughly. The player at that point had the team, had the leverage over the team, because the Commanders, as you may recall, Craig, had nothing but negative press at that point, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of, messing around with Terry McLaurin was, not an option from a fan perspective. And so they got the deal done. I'm not saying it was, he got overpaid. I'm just saying they got the deal done. Here, I mean, look, if the team wants, as much as they've talked about, the culture and all these types of things, it is still a business. Dan Quinn, referenced that today. Sometimes football and business, collide. And, I can see if the team is saying, hey, look, we love Terry McLaurin, but we got Jaden Daniels here. Like, we'll get receivers. Like, we're not worried about guys being able to, for him to throw to and get guys open. That's when you have a great quarterback. You don't necessarily have to have the higher-end guys. And, again, as good as McLaurin is, I mentioned the age, he's not the fastest guy. He's fast for humans, but he's not relatively fast to, like, the guys who are at the top of, who are the fastest guys in the league. He's definitely not the biggest guy, either in size or bulk. He's a really good route runner. I don't think he's Puka Nacua type guy. So it's like, again, this is if I'm nitpicking it from the team perspective. I can understand that. I guess for me, I just sort of was buying that there would be at least he's the first guy. Like, they re-signed Sam Cosmi last year, which is fine. But, like, Terry's like the first, okay, he's on the poster for this team. Here's our guy. We got to figure this out. And if they don't just, I don't want to say hand him the money, but if they don't, if they quibble this thing out and they really kind of drag it out, I guess it would be a little surprising based on where I thought things were. But, again, if that may just be, hey, the kumbaya part of this is over, and now we have to make business decisions, and that's where we're at. So I guess I can see it both ways, not to play the middle. I definitely get where Terry would be coming from, but, age is father time doesn't lose. So if they think that in, 2 years, this, paying him an average of, $30 million a year doesn't make sense for them, well, that's potentially a viable option. I just, it's hard to say, looking at what Terry has done, that there's a drop-off coming, but how often do you see drop-offs come?
Right. Ben Standig's with us here on the Hoffman Show. Last thing on Terry, then we can get to everyone else, because I think what you just laid out is the conundrum, and it's why this is so complicated, because it's very easy to point out all of the quote-unquote flaws in Terry's game of not the biggest, not like his speed is probably the most elite trait, but he's 4.3, high 4.3s, not low 4.3s, right? He's not, he's not the same explosive athlete as Jamar Chase is, making $40 million a year and winning the Triple Crown. He's not the greatest separator. He's an awkward catcher of the football. But at some point, you also look at the 7 years of production and just go, yeah, and that's mattered exactly when? And, in some ways, Ben, I know you'll appreciate this as a basketball guy, too. It's it's kind of the Knicks Thibodeau thing. And even though I agree more with the Knicks firing Thibodeau than I do with the Commanders making some of these arguments about Terry McLaurin, it's like, oh, Tibbs doesn't play he plays his starters too much, or he does this, or he's not flexible enough here. And it's like, okay, so does he not make the playoffs or lose in the first round every year? Oh, no, he just took us to the Eastern Conference Finals. And it's like, okay, well, then eventually we're missing something in the equation here, because that's pretty damn good. And that's kind of how I feel about Terry is you can try to detail this up to the cows come home, but eventually you're so far into the forest or so far into the trees that you're missing the forest here. And that's kind of what I feel like is happening right now with Terry.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, if the age thing is a main part of the issue, to benefit Terry here, okay, sure, he's turning 30, but he doesn't have the wear and tear of a 30-year-old, largely, again, because at Ohio State he didn't play.
Right.
He wasn't like a 3-year starter or something, because, they had so many guys. He was, playing special teams and all that, so he doesn't have that type of issues. So, he's arguably younger if we're talking mileage, but obviously, again, how do you judge that for sure? It's hard to say.
It is. Ben Standig's with us, Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Of course, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic, the Last Man Standing podcast as well. You can check out wherever you get your pods. I believe he did a walk-in talk with Nikki Javala today that did get crashed by Sam Fortier. Is that what I saw happening?
Yeah, she and I were trying to connect to do my podcast 4 different times over the last 36 hours, and things kept coming up. So we were just standing there, BSing, watching practice. I'm like, hey, why don't you just do this now? So we started to do it, and then like 6 minutes in, they canceled practice, and we had to go to work. So, but yes, the Sam Fortier took video, I believe, of that. I'm sure it'll win an Academy Award or something.
Yes, obviously an Academy Award, potentially also a Golden Globe, TBD on just how many awards that'll win from the cinematography of Sam Fortier. All right, so when you look at the rest of what you've seen over the last couple of weeks, and especially today in minicamp, these things are so hard to judge on any kind of big picture. But I kind of take a look at like, even the play that where Debo scores the touchdown, right? It's like, that's a really nice play by Debo Samuel. I can evaluate Debo without, while also saying, like, I don't know how good of a play that was for the offense because it also took a bunch of times, and Ken Norton is yelling at Jaden Daniels after that, hey, man, you would have been sacked. Like, that didn't count. So is there anybody, context notwithstanding, that has stood out to you, especially today on day one of the mandatory minicamp, that you're like, I'm really excited to watch that guy again tomorrow and then when we get back out here in late July, early August?
Well, I will just say, to that point, if it's hard to figure out, for certain positions, particularly on the line and the run game, it's borderline not even a discussion point because there's no pads, no tackling. And the fact that Dan Quinn has said that essentially multiple times, when we've asked things like, how's, the run defense looking relative to last year, or what about the offensive line? He's like, all I can look at right now is the mental part of it. Do they know the playbook? How hard are they working? Those types of things. So I think that's an important aspect of this. I mean, I will just say that I'm really intrigued in the running back room by Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt when they get to training camp. I just said that it's hard to gauge running backs, and that is true. I like the element that he brings of that, one cut burst off the field, and he's a little bit bigger than I think I thought. Just looking at the numbers, and I talked to Anthony Lynn the other day, the running back coach, and he kind of said the same thing. And I don't know, I'm not saying he's going to start or even necessarily crack the rotation since they brought back the 3 guys from last year, but he does bring an element that they don't have, and I'm curious to see if he gets more run, no pun intended, what that looks like going forward. The offensive line, again, I keep pointing out the things I just said are hard to gauge, but Laramie Tunsil was out there today. Tomorrow, I think I want to take a little closer look at how he's looking out there, just moving around. But we still have to wait to see, is Josh Connerly going to be the right tackle? They've been playing. Andrew Wiley is still there. Brandon Coleman's been playing some guard. How does that play out, and so on? And I think that's, again, we may not get a better feel for that until deep into training camp or the preseason games, but I do want to see how that looks. And then I would just say cornerback. I think Trey Amos has had some pretty good moments, all things, as he said, context appropriate moments. But Marshawn Lattimore was out there today. Dan Quinn told us no restrictions. He's out there. Okay, well, I still want to see it, though. I want to see him, run full speed. Does he, does he make it through every day? Do they have to, restrict him at all in terms of his participation? Hopefully he can go because, he and I think Deron Payne, to me, are the 2 guys. How they go this season is the biggest variances on the defense. If they are playing at good levels, then this team could definitely go up a notch or 2 from where they were a year ago. If they don't, then this team may not have any real difference makers, or not many of them besides, like, say, Frankie Louvu. And now all of a sudden, now you're looking at a team that's going to struggle to stop teams from moving the ball.
Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show. When you look at the tight end room, Logan and I talked about it a little bit this morning on Take Command, and it's a really interesting room because they have just a bunch of freaky athletes in there beyond the guys that we think will probably make the team. Like Tyree Jackson, 6'7", walking around and moves great, former quarterback. You're like, man, that guy's I don't know if it clicks like that feels dangerous. Colson Yankoff, obviously a great special teams player last year, and then all eyes beyond, Zach Ertz just keeps finding his way open and is making plays all over the place, and you're like, okay, got that. Glad he's back. But Ben Sinnott is the guy that I think is the wild card here. What have you not just seen, Ben, here in these couple of weeks of OTAs from Sinnott, but what have you heard when you talk to other people about him in and around the building of kind of what didn't click for him last year and what you expect and what they expect going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year, at the end of the day, they got way more out of Zach Ertz than they could imagine. Just his ability to play, just being available for the whole season. That did not seem likely based on his recent injury history. And obviously, John Bates is going to be on the field in 2 tight end sets. He's the blocker. Benson is not big enough to really be that guy, and he's not as seasoned, obviously, as Zach Ertz as the pass catcher part. They use 3 tight ends at times, but not a ton. So he never really got any runway. If Zach Ertz even misses, say, 2 games, then that would be an opportunity for Sinnott to get out there and show something as a pass catcher. But he just never really kind of got going, and he did have the catch from stretch way in the postseason. But I wonder what's going to change this year. Like, it's hard to see a scenario. Again, Zach Ertz maybe misses games, but other than that, it's kind of hard to see a scenario where Sinnott is like forcing his way into the lineup. Again, unless Ertz hits a wall and all of a sudden he's half the guy he was a year ago, which I'm not anticipating at this point. So I think that's kind of the rub. Sometimes it's you're just blocked by the other guys. But I think if he can be a little better as a route runner, present himself as a viable target when he gets some open space, I think those things go a long way towards helping the cause. And look, if Zach Ertz does have a dip in play at all, Sinnott's obviously significantly younger, and they like his abilities as a pass catcher, as a guy that they can line up in a bunch of different spots, including fullback. So there's a versatility aspect to him that could be intriguing. But I just unless Zach Ertz gets hurt or misses time for whatever the reason, it's hard to just see how Sinnott's getting on the field a lot. But hopefully he's still they like the development, so when the time comes, he's ready to go.
Yeah, the way he gets on the field to me is in 2 tight end sets where they want to run the football, and then obviously he'll get opportunities in the pass game, play actioning off of that. But he needs to actually know what he's doing and do it at a high level in the run game in order to make that viable, and that is something that he struggled with at times last year. So that's a great point, because it's they're not just going to take Zach Ertz off the field just to be like, hey, Sinnott, go out there and run around when Zach Ertz is as good as Zach Ertz has been. Ben Standig writing about all of this at The Athletic, the Commanders beat reporter for that fine outlet. And, of course, check out the Last Man Standing podcast as well. Ben, appreciate your time, sir. Hope the traffic has relented and you are getting closer to home, and it is much better for you to and fro tomorrow.
I have made it to out of the traffic. I'm back to freedom. Very excited about
Excellent.
that. Appreciate everybody is worrying about that. But yeah, so we're good. Thanks for having me on, Craig. And I'll see you out there.
All right, sounds good. That's Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.